Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for June of 2026. There are 11 new albums that I'm going to be talking about in this video that I spun over the last month. There are, as always, time codes listed in the description for each individual review. If you would like to skip around to any particular review, this month I did get to a request, along with a bevy of new things and morbid curiosities that I decided to sink my teeth into. I've got some fun stuff that I'll be talking about this month, and I hope that you're excited to hear my thoughts. If you are, be sure to give it a like, and let's go ahead and get started by talking about...
I'm tired of bucking up my talks with the Kimber. Get spanked with the Beretta M9. Rap game Lakeith, they want nigga shit. But when a
New frequent commenter Dylan Adkins wanted me to talk about this new Peggy record, and I had already had it on my radar to do so. I just kept sort of falling away from me as things started to come out. But I did give it some time in June because my interest sort of to do so increased considering its more divisive reception than the usual glazing of Peggy that happens throughout corners of the internet. On the other side, I kind of get why. I think that the sonics of this record are easily the best component of it. It very much has the same whirlwind of ideas with a polish that I appreciated on a record like LP, but I feel like what's missing from even a record like comparing it to LP or some of the stuff he's dropped from recent years that I'm like Scaring the Hose and the like, it spends too much time in its opulent tangents and doesn't feel grounded in a way that like a lot of his catalog has up to this point. It still has an unhinged style to its writing, but it has a bravado to it and a spirit to it that I think is what personally sets it back for me. But I think it's ironic that we have a record like this following especially some of the ironic fringes that were laden throughout what the broader populace got into him through via Veteran and All My Heroes Are Cornballs. Like the Money two-piece of dollars and yen, both bangers. Burning Hammer and Meet the Dealers, and even obviously like the style within Valentine's Day Freestyle feel very indicative of Peggy's career thus far. Those feel like sort of refreshing worlds of familiarity amidst some of the tangents it goes through on here. But I like that type of pace. Again, I just kind of wish the vibes were at least a little bit different. Like, I don't really give a fuck about GYBB between Yen and Valentine's Day Freestyle. I like that he's having his Kanye moment on Pop This Heat, because he, again, feels very happy that he got to connect with the hero, and I'm happy for him. But moments like that don't happen enough to reaffirm the attitude of this record, in my opinion, considering some of the posturing that happens on here. When promoting this, he very much talked about how it was a record you like keeping close to the chest, and it very much feels like a vulnerable type of record. His mood is tangential to a world that people know him from, and I wouldn't have been shocked if he just kept this to himself. I'm not upset that he released it to the world. I think it's interesting to see him carry himself in this way. And again, the sonics on here are very much in the world that I like from him and have some fun adventures elsewhere that I think work for him. I just don't think the sum of its parts is as good as other sums of his parts because of some of the broader, mood of this. I'm giving this a 7 because it's solid. It's a solid record in his catalog. I just don't think it's one that I'm going to be holding on to in the rear view quite as much as other records of his I've liked in the past. I like the sincerity on his last record far more than the glimpses into sincerity that crop up on here. That's a good way to surmise it, honestly.
Let's go! Light at the end of the tunnel. I know the reaper is coming. I can't pretend I don't love you. Life is a bad.
Vince Staples joins Tyler, the Creator, in being an artist whose new album I bought before I got the chance to talk about it. So it gets to live in the background of said video talking about said album. Crybaby is an album that I was absolutely hyped for upon first teasings. Not just because I think Vince's artistic trajectory is on a real upswing over the last handful of releases, but with the lead single Blackberry Marmalade, we got the teasings of some new Sonic adventures that Vince was wanting to take us on. And it felt like a pivot akin to what he gave us in 2017 with Big Fish Theory. So I was excited to see where he would dive further into the worlds of rock-embraced Sonics. And I gotta say, on the other side, we see him go through other styles that feel very much like in service to the themes of this sort of odds that Vince sees himself with throughout a certain particular sect of people in this country, along with... I love how the very aggressive, abrasive lean of Blackberry Marmalade gets pushed even farther on Go Go Gorilla, a song that goes even harder against police brutality in a much more upfront manner. You know, while I have issues with maybe White Flag's piece within this puzzle cropping up so early, I do think that it is a well-written, sort of fully defeated moment internally that looks at even the optimistic side as a bit of a pensiveness, with a bit of pensiveness, with Love is a Rock, Love is a Hard Place. You know, something that gets further pursued through an addictive lust via TV Guide, all while embracing some of the more overt rock ideologies from a songwriting side just as well, throughout the lenses of Cotton, with a chorus that very much feels classic in style, but well executed all the same. And just like seeing him flirt with the ideas of embracing electronics leaning production on Big Fish Theory, I do like a lot of the core sonics of this, and I like the ways he sort of brings rock traditionalism with rap in a way that isn't like rap rock in the sense that it has been sort of commodified into over the last almost 30 years, that it's been very much a forward-thinking part of crafting rock music. Like, the guitars on this more lean into a love of, like, post-punk and the like in a way that I think works for especially the attitude that Vince is leaning with on this record. You know, it lends to the more overt directness on tracks like Blackberry Marmalade and Go Go Gorilla, but also lend to the swagger and create a different mood underneath the mix, a la the pensive, almost like feeling like you're addicted to the TV on TV Guide, or the underlying sadness amidst White Flag, where it feels like Vince is just wanting not just the conflict and not just the conflicts he's facing to stop, but everything to stop, just to take a minute from it all. I think the closest this record gets to like melding those ideas in a more traditional sense is on The Big Bad Wolf, but it's a song that like also feels like the real, not tentpole, but like meeting point where all of the ideas sort of coalesce into. While I do think this album has a bit more of a vibrancy to it that shines above some of the darker crevasses and moodiness of Dark Times, I do think that it skirts those lines and introduces his energy well into that space on a track like Do You Know the Devil, and almost like B to the calmness of White Flag's A, and I get that kind of juxtaposition in the track listing, and I do think that is another really great moment in the track listing too. This record is really, really good. I think that it is a strong release from Vince still, and I think that like while I've seen people dunk on a lot of how he embraces rock music, I think that mostly stems from the production, and I can see why people don't necessarily like the production of this album, because there's parts of it that feel very much like glossed up in a way that like feels commercialized, but I think that it's more just a holistic just love of this sound. You know, the bass production on tracks like Only in America and on The Running Man very much evoke this like mid-2010s energy, but I think it modernizes it nicely. I think if I were to give a big, real critique of the album, it wouldn't necessarily be huge issues with the production or the songs. It would be in the sequencing, and it's mostly in the sense of like, I like White Flag. I think it's a really, really good song, and I love the energy of it, and I love what it sort of tries to embody mood-wise. But I feel like it comes a little early on bringing that mood to the forefront. While it's a nice sort of like swerve from the first couple tracks energy-wise, I feel like mood-wise it kind of comes in a bit bit early. Either way, I still really like this album. I'm giving it like an 8. I think it's a really strong notch in Vince's discography. It's a record that obviously I'll be keeping on rotation intermittently, even with this year in the rear view. If I'm ever wanting to hear Vince embrace like a nice different style. I don't have Big Fish Theory yet, and obviously this is just another really good version of him doing that, in my opinion. Strong record. It'll be on my of the year list. I just don't quite know where. Shortly after they released Love Is Not Enough, Converge announced Hum of Hurt, a second album for this year. And I know that I wasn't the only one that was already hype as fuck for it, because, again, they are, bar none, maybe the most consistent metal band fucking ever. And Hum of Hurt has a wholly different feel than Love Is Not Enough, but retains the dread that permeates throughout that record. But it's because it feels more raw on Hum of Hurt. It's a record that very much taps into a love of their lower end that felt present on Love Is Not Enough, but it gives that low end room to really ruminate with the listener in a way that I absolutely adore. You know, they still come out teeth gnashing throughout Slip the Noose, but this bass groove that is so goddamn sinister cuts through the mix so fucking nicely. That helps throw the listener into the smacks amongst doom and gloom. It is a record that feels like being steeped in some noise to the point of madness. And it's got this real, just animalistic side to it that, like, feels a lot less restrained than the outright brutal misery of Love Is Not Enough. I adore this record, though. I don't think I like it as much as that, but both are bangers from this year that are going to be high on that of the year list for me, for sure. The style switch up amidst the whirlwind I Won't Let You Go is just fantastic. Dream Debris is this colossal jam that culminates into this 6-minute sort of brisk stomp that I just eat the fuck up, man. Just like Love Is Not Enough, it is in and out, but it just keeps its mood all in your face and all encompassing in a way that I just love. And I think that these guys just keep bringing some heat every time. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. It could be a 9, could be an 8. Giving it an 8 for now. It's one of those records that I'll probably keep coming back to. Again, I don't like it as much as Love Is Not Enough, but I dig the atmosphere all the same. While one could very much throw the weight of my love of Skrillex's surprise album from last year, Fuck You Skrillex, you think you're Andy Warhol, but you're not, on the irony throughout the track listing, and that anything else he's done could easily be just seen as passé. But I think his duology he came back with a couple years ago still has some great shit on it. A Quest for Fire has some tracks that I've held on to pretty tightly since its release. And I think that by and large, it's a really, really solid electronic record. And honestly, this resurgence of his has been fun to follow, because I think he's had an interesting sort of like embracing of his past and a sort of like subverting of that. But with Soma, we see just him trying to make another set of bangers. And while there are some bangers in here and some fun, again, nostalgic twinges, I don't think it necessarily wholly hits the same as it did on A Quest for Fire, or even on parts of the other record from that year that I don't like as much as this, admittedly. But I don't think this is that much better than that second record. Like, don't get me wrong, that sort of 3-piece switch up early on in the record of Tronky, Smoke, and Nosh Without You has a fucking hilarious payoff in Nosh Without You, considering the lead sample of that song. But like, even its follow-up is an example of like the whiplash of quality, in my opinion, of this project. Because I don't think Scut 2 is all that dope of a track. It's honestly kind of one of the more monotonous tracks throughout this track listing. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think the record loses me after that. I think it comes back around. I enjoy the very classic feeling groove of Penterala. I dig La Noche 2 and its synths. And I think there's some classic energy permeating throughout Duro that I enjoy a lot as well, as far as like later in the album cuts. I just think this record has the same consistency, or has the same like well tapped into collaborative pot as a record like A Quest for Fire, but it does have some glimmers of that in ways that I think still shine, even amidst some of the more meddling ideas on here. I'm giving this a 6. It's a very solid record. It's a very like okay album that like I don't think I'll listen to collectively after this month anymore, but I'll at least have some highlights that I may throw on the shuffle every now and again. Even if I thought The Golden Casket was just a solid sort of attempt at taking the Modest Mouse machine further down the creative pipeline, so to speak, I'm never going to count this group out, because I think Isaac is a hell of a songwriter and knows how to bring a batch of musicians together to craft at least a journey that by and large has been proven to be an engaging experience for the listener, providing some nice twists on alt-rock and inspos from different worlds. I think the best proof of concept of that is the newest Modest Mouse album, An Eraser and a Maze, an album that collectively speaking is the best Modest Mouse album in about 20 years, but that's not saying much because there's only been about a handful of records since then. I enjoy the production of this by and large the most, and think that it accents a lot of the sonic vignettes that are pulled together on here, all of which kind of feel indebted to the ongoing pilgrimage this group has been pillaging forth on. Case in point, tracks like Picking Dragons' Pockets, Life's a Dream, Third Side of the Moon, and I Can't Talk Right Now, all ubiquitously this group, but from different eras, and in some instances find ways to add some modern twinges to that. Same with some of the more pulled back moments, like on Dogbed in Heaven or Remember Yourself. The raw production on those songs help give those, more minimal songs a lot more intimacy and rawness. But in true fashion of this band, they find a way to still carve themselves out a new world, even tangentially to those sort of modernizations of the old. A la songs like Rotten Fruit, which has this groove that feels very akin to maybe some of the ideas they were trying to pull together on the last couple of releases, but really hits a good groove with it. Or on a song about nothing that really just feels like a meltdown in a fashion that, like, I don't feel like this group has done like this to a degree in a while. Like, I think this record is mad solid. I don't think it overstays its welcome. I think it's a really nice batch of songs that show this group still has legs. And I'd say if you like this group and may have counted them out, I would give this a spin and see if it reevaluates your perspective on the band, because I know that like their last two records have been very divisive, but I think that this is like just a really, really decent record. It's a decent upgrade, I should say, from those into a record that I will see myself probably throwing on as the year goes on, more so than those last couple of releases. I'm giving this a 7 right now. It could probably grow. Similarly to the Periphery album, I have kind of been holding on to parts of this, and I kind of dig what the group is doing on here a lot, honestly. Put your foot up on the pedal. While this is not the first time I've talked about Alfred Banks on this channel, I did review what ended up being the last album from a duo that he was a part of at one point, Sax Kicks Ave. But their dissolvement is a component of the sort of story and journey Alfred takes you through on this new album, Yestermonth. An album that I caught wind of because he was promoting it on TikTok, and I really liked his initial, like, comeback circuit that evolved into this album push. I enjoyed the vibes a lot. It was fun watching him hop on other people's beats, and I like that on Yestermonth he very much tries to keep the energy, that energy of optimism and sort of looks at the future in a good light. The heart of this record, you know, there's a sort of rising of the phoenix that sort of feels like this album is pushing you through, that I enjoy the progression of. The sort of rising up and coming into your own world being the mission statement of this throughout the first couple of tracks of Step Up and the interlude. After that, Luther, where the producer of this record, Luther Vandals, has this quote of life being the culmination of the ups and downs, but making the most of it, essentially. Step Up is this sort of like call to using your past to shape a better future. And you see those ups and downs a bit directly after that through the next couple of tracks of Window, Oh Well, and High Speed. Window being this high of looking at the love in Alfred's life and just basking in that love before getting into one's own problems, especially talking about the sax kicks av stuff directly on Oh Well, but having this sort of like speech afterwards with Elena Speaks being this sort of intermission part of the track where the idea of leaving that in the rear view and pushing on pushes the listener even further through letting the problems be yesterday's issues. And I like there the album's drive is more meant to carry that at high speeds, with High Speed being this more energetic leaning cut that I really like seeing Alfred sort of get more vicious with it, tearing it up a little bit more, getting a little more fire in the track listing. I enjoyed that as somebody who's enjoyed some of the fun, clever bars he's pulled together on those sort of like promo tracks. It's nice to see it present on this track, but still using that as a piece of this overall picture. You know, there's a sort of coasting that peters off after that High Speed throughout Creep and Sunday Drive, but I enjoy the vibes as they permeate throughout there. I feel like they help sort of push the listener into the sunset where Fly Higher really starts to like uplift the listener up. Now, I will say what I dislike about the album is that it does end there, because I feel like Fly Higher is a moment where the album really feels like it's flying on this really good stride. It's really just following through after a good string of some solid tracks, and it feels like there should be like this farther distance that it flies to, but it just sort of like pulls to a halt after that record really sort of flashes out. I feel like that has been a through line for me throughout some of the stuff I've loved this year. It was a problem I had with that Baby Keem record. I still love that record. Still been having it in my rotation in pieces, but like, I just, similarly to the energy of that record, this record feels like it's really pushing for a huge swing, and it really leans with that, and then it feels like it sort of like stops itself before it really gets going. It's a case where I would very much love to see Alfred go harder, go in more, but I enjoyed the time that I've spent in Yestermonth, and I think that, like, the production is really solid. I think that, like, again, the pen game really shines. The storytelling is a good balance of a detailed and emotional, and like, really getting to the heart of one's own perspective in that portrait. I dig the through line. I think that the lyrical through line is also really, really strong and well pulled together. It's just a case of me wanting more than what's being brought here. I'm giving this a 7. It's a really strong album. It's a really, really solid album, and it's an example of like an artist using their struggles to find a really good place on the other side. It's just a place that I wanted more within.
Yes, 7 wonders and 4 corners, did goodbyes inside.
Like I'm sure some people in some music spaces, got exposed to Infinity's song via Momo Boyd's collaboration on the Baby Keem album, Casino. I've also been very much a fan of her single she dropped, Oops. It's been on my heavy rotation, but I have been wanting to listen to her band proper, Infinity song, and I figured I'd use this new album that they just dropped as an excuse to do so. And I dig what they got going on. I dig this, like, pop-focused rock sound that they got going on. It's got a production style that, like, honestly, I would say feels similar to a record I actually ended up checking out later on in the month that I'll talk about later on in this video. But it's got, like, it's got like a decent sound to it. Like everybody's got a nice pocket. The bass has a good pop to it. It's not like my favorite bass production used in modern rock, but I think it's a pretty solid one. The guitar, when they want it to have a good like carry of the melody, they use it to do so too. Like I really dig the acoustic groove on Sayonara. That's honestly the biggest standout song for me on this. I really, really love the songwriting on Sayonara, the turns of phrase and the chorus and all that. I think that it is a pretty choice, catchy jam. I also dig how the guitars pop, especially on the chorus of Break Out as well. I enjoy to a lesser degree, I enjoy the simple, fun nature of a song like 1 Foot Out. It's just a good rock dance jam that I think is pretty decently put together. I certainly think that it's a better dance groove or dance, inviting song than like the more groove-oriented Hurricane after that. Not that I hate the disco embrace on that song. It's just an era, a lane that I see crop up in a lot of pop music that I think can, go one of two ways. And I think that it's like an okay version of that. It's just not my favorite in the style, especially compared to the other styles that they approach on this record. But this is a solid little rock album that I feel like if you enjoy pop music with a little bit of a rock-inspired twist, I definitely give this a shot. I would akin the vocal trading on here similar to what occurs on like a Sunflower Bean record. And some of the atmosphere as far as like how they harness a groove kind of calls to the same that band has done a couple times, but this group really much more sits in like a pop-leaning realm and less like a glam-leaning realm like some of Sunflower Bean has done. Like, I'd probably give this, like, a 7 out of 10. It's a decently produced, fun, little pop rock album that has some decent hook work. And, again, some nice use of different vocalists giving a nice different variety to the sound that I think is really nice.
Man, just get the job done, and I'ma say the least. Tell me what's the tab, I'll pay it this week.
The last time I talked about YG was, ironically enough, about 7 years ago, give or take a week or two, because I talked about him during the June listening log update for 2019 for his For Real record. A record that didn't wholly dazzle me, to the point that I didn't go too deep on YG's broader discography, and I gotta say that, like, following this, a record that feels like he's trying to push as a bigger artistic package, I'm not really that interested in a deeper pool of thought from YG, because it feels like while there are some songs where he very much tries to keep it on topic, or he has this like window of like a solid approach on his own, I feel like this record really leans on some features and some quality production that honestly outshine YG in a couple of instances. I do think that there's a nice little two-piece early on with Kudos and Hitman where I feel like this album really reaches its stride. It's following the Pusha T collab OMG and comes before a relatively meddling Posse cut, admittedly, but like something a bit dazzling feature-wise with Simon Says, where especially on Hitman, he's trying to go deep on a vision and go really tell you a story. But I think the fact that he keeps it in a world that is within his wheelhouse, so to speak, it shines. One of the bigger controversies on this record is the song Tiffany, and I would agree it's very much just like a swing and a big whiff, especially with the topic of approaching trans identity in a dating space and hookup culture and all that. I think that his sort of bravado and deconstruction he tries to go in on the follow-up Insecure very much further paints a picture on his own sort of headspace within writing and trying to pull together a painting like this that makes all of that deeper conceptualization feel all the more frail. It feels a little bit too shallow. Again, talking about features that very much shine bright. JID and Absol, I feel like go deeper in their own senses a bit harder on that song. And other features, obviously I got to shout out the Tyler feature on The Low. I think that as far as like tapping into that Whisper in the Club energy that I think again comes together pretty well on this for YG. Tyler sort of just chef's kiss it in his own way that I really enjoy. This record has a wild hit ratio that I think its highs and lows don't set it anywhere amongst the realms of the best and brightest of the year, but they set it just shy of some of the lowest of lows. I'd give this like a 5 out of 10. It is a very net neutral, considering its input type of release, in my opinion, that I think has great components, but some ideas that just fall apart, and some bigger ideas that I feel like fall apart in tandem with that. I didn't know until getting into this 68 record that it's their last, but I think as far as like a bold and brash close to a career that's tried to fight with gnashing teeth this whole time, I think that these guys have done that in a pretty solid fashion here. It comes out swinging with Rain Everyone, a record that feels like it's got that same anarchistic twinge in its blood, but one with a sense of end in sight. Something that carries into this theatricality amongst the presentation of Will You There, before winding down in a very nice sort of like twist throughout Always Love into Fall Will. One of the like broader track listing bookends that this record tries to push in, which is an approach that I think is interesting for this band to do, because while this band has tried in the past to dabble into pacing like this, I feel like they've always been kind of hit or miss with it, and I feel like it works better on here, but because it's in less of a direct fashion. There doesn't feel like a true, like, bigger through line of this. There's just an air amidst the sonics of this that I think makes, you know, a lot of the ideas within this just sort of like feel more rounded out, as opposed to like trying to go bigger with it in a thematic sense. There's still some great guitar twinges outside of that, like the just bluesy ass Sun So Beauty is another moment that I think helps bring the vibes into a groovier world, that help let this band dance in their own sort of spirit as they, you know, wave goodbye. This record's solid. I like it more than at least the last couple of releases they've done. I don't think it ranks maybe like as their top best, but I think as far as like these guys bowing out, this is a pretty good rendition of that. It's again, it's in and out, which is very much the best thing that this band does at their brightest, is that they make these very just lightning quick, well-constructed, chaotic messes. And I think this is another solid notch in that belt, even if it is the last notch in that belt. I'm giving it a 7. It's a solid send-off that I think if you've liked this band, this is something that I definitely would check out, even if you may not have been a fan of how they've done their records in recent years.
Once you famous, everything becomes sacrificial. You make the same mistake twice, it isn't.
On the opening track of this Tierra Whack mixtape, Wax Museum, she says that people say that she needs to rap more. And I agree. Even in the case of this Pocket Project, I'm left wanting more Tierra Whack. But I think she uses these 27 minutes as efficiently as one could imagine. At least in the case of being as cutthroat and visceral as one could be on the mic. There's a handful of conductor beats and production in that style. It's got this hazy atmosphere to it that very much lends to the brevity in service of creating this uneasy atmosphere. Her flow on Brazilian Wax, for example, is just fucking insane. I think she gets direct in a way where her message feels felt even to the listener on a track like Totem. She has this almost dialogue style that she paints throughout the bars on Queen's Crown, while also, again, just going in on 215 just a couple tracks later. That said, she doesn't lose sight of some a little more accessible moments from a songwriting perspective, like on Wax Paper. That All About the Benjamin's hook is great. Same with the mantra style on Gotta Get It. She just dances with that beat on there just eloquently. I dig this project a lot. Again, it's in and out, but it uses its time so fucking well. I give this like an 8 out of 10. I like seeing Tierra back. I hope that she does more, but I always hope she does more, because any glimmer I get into her style, I always love what she's got going on. If you respect a good pen game, you gotta give this a spin, because I think it's really, really strong. This Muse album was the other one I was teasing in that Infinity Song review for a rock album that takes a different approach to production, that feels similar, but fits in their own wheelhouse of the genre, that works well for them. I will say in the case of this, there is something missing. There is a je ne sais quoi in the Sonics missing on this Muse album, but I think that as a whole, on the WoW signal, Muse are the best they've been in a hot second, maybe since Drones. And I think that it doesn't necessarily go much bolder than maybe that record, as far as like going there as a unit, but I think that like the production is far less obnoxious than that record. I actually really love the guitars on here and the drums. I feel like because this band is known for going big, and they do thematically and sonically still go big, there's a point where it gets a bit muddy and a bit too like dissonant in a way that like doesn't feel in service to the creative energy, like on the opener, The Dark Forest. There's parts where the mix on that song are fucking rough because of the style of production they have going on. But like the way that they meld on Hexagons, I think is pretty fucking choice, and that song sounds like classic Muse in a way that was like kind of shocking to hear upon first listen, because like again, they just haven't sounded like this in a longer than Drones. I'll give it that. It's been a minute since they've sounded that tight as a unit, and I feel like as far as making an album conceptualized around whatever the WoW signal is, feels very Muse. And there's moments like Hexagons where they very much like they just kind of coalesce into a way that just makes sense and works, man. I think the same comes out throughout the by the time the chorus of Cryogen comes around, there's just this moment where it feels like, damn, Muse is really kind of here now, guys. Hell yeah. And there's other moments in the back half, like the two-piece of Unraveling and Hush, that I think come together into a pretty nice batch of, a nice two-piece in the record. There are some other lows and some other moments that I think set the record back. The pocket of Night Shift Superstar and Shimmering Scars is a super funky into ballad-esque moment that I think kind of stumbles in the track listing. I think the bass production on Night Shift Superstar is nice, though, from a lover of funk perspective. I've just never been the biggest fan of Muse and funky. It's never wholly been my jam. That said, this album is mad solid. It is mad solid. I do wish the production were a little different in some moments. I don't like some of the songs, but I think as a whole, this is a decent record by this band. Something that I haven't said in a long, long time. I'm giving this a 6, because it is that solid. And that was what I listened to in June. Do you agree with my thoughts on those records? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts along with any records from this year that I haven't talked about yet that you'd like to see me talk about in this segment in the comment section down below. Again, if you liked it, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. This came out a little later in the week than I was originally planning, but I've been trying to really dive into the worlds of self-care amidst some hectic times. But I hope you still enjoyed this nonetheless. I've got the actual weekend special dropping tomorrow. It's the last Cash Boys for this casual summer before we slide into some other summer fun. But hopefully you're excited for that. Hopefully you stick around for the next thing I got going on. But either way, I'm going to go. I've been Viral Rack. You guys are good at lives and situations. And I'll see you another day.